Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. I've got a Dell G3 gaming laptop here that has a broken hinge. So as you can see on the back, it's coming apart, and if I try to open the laptop, you can see that that hinge isn't moving properly, and you can see the screen at the bottom there is starting to pull apart, and yeah, difficult to show it on camera, but yeah, it's going to break up if we try and open it. So the hinges are broken, and in this video we're going to look at how to do it from start to finish, including ordering the parts. So we've got to start out by disassembling the display assembly and having a look at how much needs to be replaced. At the very least, my prediction is that the top lid, which is this back cover of the screen here, which is just called the lid, this is almost certainly going to have to be replaced, because this is where all the hinges and stuff screw into, and generally speaking they screw into plastic mounts that break, which is why modern laptops are crap, basically. So we're probably going to need a new one of those. We might also have broken hinges in there, or more. So let's roll the intro and get into it, everyone. We want to start off by removing the display assembly from the laptop. So I'll take the bottom panel off the laptop, then we'll disconnect the battery, and we'll start having a look at how to take the display assembly off, and then we can take that apart and see what needs to be replaced. Dell laptops are weird, and they tend to have captive screws along the back row, but removable screws everywhere else. I'm not sure why. I don't see the point in having some captive screws and some not captive screws, but I trust that the people that design these things know more about that than me. And I'll just pull up the front of the laptop like that, and with a little bit of a shake and a bit of a wiggle, I should just be able to free the clips. You coming? Come on. That seems to have done the job. There we go. Battery disconnected. So usually going to the display assembly, we'll have the actual display cable, which is quite easy to find here. That's that guy. I'll lift that out. And we'll have the wireless antennas as well. So those are threaded underneath the main heatsink, but it looks like there's enough play there that I can probably get those out without having to take the heatsink off. That much being said, because this is a gaming laptop, it's entirely possible that it's worth doing a thermal paste change while it's in for service. I usually do not disturb thermal paste unless I think there is a reason to replace it. But gaming laptops are one of those times where it's generally probably worth doing, because these guys run hot, and running hot means it's going to cook the paste. So I will actually go to the trouble of taking the heatsink off. Yeah, that was worth doing. The CPU paste doesn't look very good. It's dried around the outside and there's some oil on the inside. And GPU paste doesn't look a lot better. Some laptops will use a really horrifying goop for the VRAM chips and the VRMs. Thankfully, this one has just got thermal pads there that have stayed nice and intact, so we can leave those alone. We'll worry about changing this when we reassemble it. There we go. Those are the two wires going into the display assembly. So now I'm going to undo the screws for the display assembly. At this point, I'd usually say to open the laptop up and hang the display off the back of into your lap, so it's open at a 90-degree angle. But this display looks like it's not going to open without a fight, and I'm really worried about the LCD cracking. I don't even know if it has already cracked, so we might have to do some testing on that in a moment. So I'm just going to open that, and I'm going to manually lever the hinges open. So the right hand hinge is the one that has failed. So the left hand one, I should just be able to jam a screwdriver in here and just pry this guy open. Ooh, that's got some big plastic pegs there. That doesn't want to go. Okay, maybe I will have to try and wrestle this open after all. Oh, I wish I'd done this before I disassembled it now. What I'll do is I'll put my hand down the inside of the laptop and try and support at these 2 points. So I'm supporting the leverage of the display directly with my hands. Gently, gently, gently. So while we're halfway, I'll just tilt things up so you can see what I'm doing. So I've got my hands, I'm pressing my hand on the display assembly like that, here and here, which is where the hinges are applying pressure. So that way the pressure is being supported by my hand, not by the LCD and the rest of the display assembly. And then we just go nice and slow. Okay, right, I've got the body off, so we can put this to one side now. And now we have the display assembly. So you can see the right hinge is completely loose there. The left one looks intact, but we'll, if this is not solved, the left one would not be far behind in failing. So let's get the front bezel off. Can I open that? There we go. And this guy will just pull off effectively. It has clips, but if you just gently wiggle, those clips will free up. This one's going to be stubborn, because of course it is. If you pull too hard, then this bezel will just snap. And that's not the end of the world. They're not expensive, but it's always nice to not have to replace additional parts. So I'll just use my metal prying tool here just to pry away there. So as well as the plastic clips, there's also some double-sided tape just around the edge of the LCD, which is to stop gaps from forming between the bezel and the LCD. But it does just mean that when we lift this up, we are pulling at the LCD panel. And the panel can take, the panel can take a reasonable amount of abuse, but we are going to try and be as gentle as possible. Right, and that leaves us with just the bottom, which most of it has come unstuck. This is the one where the glue really makes you feel it. Right, there's our bezel in one piece. So if we have a look at the LCD now, so there is this plastic, there's this adhesive strip that was holding the bezel to the bottom of the display, and where I've pulled the bezel off, just some of this plastic stuff has come off of the LCD. Now, this is not the end of the world, but the LCD is extremely fragile underneath it, so I'm just going to gently lay that down. It looks bad, but the LCD is probably completely fine, unless it was already cracked when the hinges failed. But touch wood, I don't see any cracks on this, and usually I can spot them, so I think that's going to be okay. I might just plug this in and do a power on check in a minute, because I actually already have the parts that we're going to need today, but I didn't check the LCD, so that might have been a mistake on my part. So the right hand hinge has just fallen out, which is unfortunate because it means the screws for that are lost. So I'll need to find some replacements. We'll take out the left hand hinge. So we've got 1, 2, 3 big flat screws. That one has failed. Like I said, the left hinge won't be far behind. That one's okay. And that one's okay. Right, and there's our left-hand hinge. So these hinges are actually intact. I have spares because they didn't cost too much, but we'll have a conversation about those in a moment. We'll carry on disassembling first. To remove the LCD panel, we've got 2 adhesive strips, one on each side, holding it in. And these are stretch release strips because there's a pull tab down in the corner here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently start pulling this out. And as you can see, a strip starts following it. And I'll just slowly pull that out bit by bit. Make some very funky noises. And resist the urge to do a big long pull because it'll probably snap. And if it snaps, then you're in for a bad time. Because then you have to start squirting isopropyl alcohol down the sides of the LCD and trying to pry it out without breaking it and hoping that the alcohol doesn't get into the LCD. It's a bad time. Oop, there we go. There's one. And there's the other. That LCD should just lift out now. Apart from the LCD connector on the back, that's got a little bit of tape holding it in place and a locking bar. Oop. And there we go. This LCD is an NV156 FHM-N3D. If you do need to replace these, you can bash that model number into eBay and it'll come up with a bunch of suitable replacements. It's probably, I'm guessing it's 1080p, I'm guessing it's IPS. It's probably not high refresh rate, but if you really want to, you can also bash that model number into a Google search. And if you have a look for a website such as Panel Look, they'll show you the technical spec of the panel, and you can check if it's a touchscreen, IPS or TN, high refresh rate, and so on and so forth. And that allows you to just check what specs you're actually looking for in case you're not familiar with the laptop. The other things to watch out for when you're replacing the LCD is look out for revision numbers. This one's got -N3D, which is probably the revision. Usually there's some extra numbers and letters in brackets, and that indicates what fittings the display has on it. For example, this display has no fittings at all. It's just a bare LCD with the control board below it. But there's probably a revision of this LCD that has some tabs for screw holes on it for screwing into the display. Or it might have one that's got like an extra frame on it, or there might be a version where this control board is on the back of the screen instead of hanging below it, so the screen is more compact, and so on and so forth. So watch out for little revision differences like that, because that's the bit that will catch you out. You'll buy something that's got the correct panel in it, but doesn't actually fit the screen. The connector itself, this is pretty universal these days. It's a 30-pin EDP connector, and that's basically standard, so you don't need to worry too much about that. There are older laptops might be 40-pin, or if it's an exotic display like high refresh or something, you might want to just double check. But by and large, it's just going to be 30-pin EDP. I said I was going to do a test of that display, so I think I'll do that in a moment. I'll take this display cable out. That'll go up to the webcam. You can disconnect it from the webcam, but we're going to need to pull this out for our new back panel anyway. So I'm just going to dig my prying tool underneath the webcam. These webcams are often extremely thin PCBs, so just be very careful taking these out because they will want to bend and just snap in half. There we go. Now, because I'm not sure, I'm going to check if this display works, which is a bit of a pain in the ass because I took the heatsink off. So I'm just going to very quickly zap this heatsink on. I'm aware that the thermal paste on it is no good, but we don't need it to have good cooling. We just need it to display a picture for a moment so I can see if this screen actually works or not. I won't even bother doing all the screws up. It just needs to give me a picture. There we go. There. Yeah, that LCD panel is completely fine. No problem. Alright, I'm going to power this down quick because it doesn't have proper cooling. Don't worry about all of this smudge on the screen. That will all clean up. Okay, so how do we find the parts that we need then? Well, we're looking for a Dell G3 15 laptop, but that doesn't really tell us much. One of the annoying things about Dell laptops is they don't actually have, well, they don't show on them very useful model numbers at all. Some of them do, but most of them don't. So Dell G3 15 gaming laptop doesn't actually tell us a lot at all. So what I'm going to do is we want to check the bottom for the service tag. This is basically the serial number. And if I Google search for Dell warranty check and go to the support services and contracts website, we can tap in our serial number here. So I'll put in this serial number. And this confirms that it's actually a Dell G3 15 3590. So that's how we discover what model we actually have. So now we know it's a G3 15 3590. It's an awful lot easier to search for parts. So let's hit up eBay and search for parts. Here's a search I did earlier on. So I've just searched for Dell G3 15 3590 lid. And that's come up with a whole bunch of results here. And there are a couple of different results depending on what we do and don't get. So at the top here, we've got the whole shooting match. We've got the lid, a front bezel, and hinges. So if the display assembly is completely trashed on your one, you can buy the whole lot, and it's 50 quid, which is pretty darn good, actually. That's very good bang for buck for a high-end laptop. Gaming laptops can be a real nightmare to find parts for, but it looks like these ones are pretty easy to get hold of. This one here, 15 quid just for the lid. This is grade C pre-owned, and this is probably crap. If we actually look at this one... Okay, well, the screw holes look like they're intact on that, so that might actually be acceptable, but I would be very, very, very wary about buying a used top lid, because those holes may, they look okay from here, but grade C, yeah, you get what you pay for, I think. So here we've got a lid and hinges set for 40 quid. This is the option that I went for because I didn't know if the hinges were going to be broken or not. So I just said, sod it. For the extra £10, I'll get the hinges with it. No problem. What we could have done is this one here, 30 quid just for the lid. So £10 less. Again, that gets the cost down lower. And has anyone got... There's another full set. If we went looking, we could probably find bezel and or hinges on their own as well. However, by and large, you're going to need at least the lid. So a combination of one of these options is going to be what you want. So I bought this set here, and it has arrived, and I have it here. So here's our replacement hinges. Now the hinges... Now the old hinges are not broken. However, they might be stiff. They will always be stiff in the hands. That's normal because you're used to having big old levers on them. So we could add a little bit of oil and just undo that lock nut a little bit just to back off the tightness. These new ones though, that one is much smoother in the hand and it's not full of dust and grit and grime. So since I've got the new hinges, I'll use them. So I'll put this old one to one side. And I'll use these new ones because they're nice and new, they're already oiled, and they're already adjusted. So we're going to use those. Then here's our new top lid. And the new top lid, it's come with new stretch release tape pre-fitted, which is nice, so we don't now have to worry about that. And obviously all of the screw holes along the bottom are all intact, so that's all nice as well. Good. All right. The only thing we're missing is the Wi-Fi antennas, so I'll need to steal those from the old display assembly. So let's start building up our new display assembly. I'll put the Wi-Fi antennas back in. These are fairly straightforward to locate into place. The wires can be a little bit of a pain, so I'll just fit those along here. I think that went along the top. I should have looked. That's those in. Now we'll get our display cable in place. Starting from the webcam, there's usually 2 plastic pins, one in the top left and one in the bottom right, that help you center this guy. And as long as you're sitting on those plastic pins, you know that the webcam will be correctly centered. And I'll just press the cable going down there. I'll just press the cable down the back of the display there, and that way that will just roughly stick in with its previous adhesive, and it should hold everything in place. Don't worry if this guy doesn't stick down so well. By the time everything is in place, it's all going to be held in by the front bezel, and it's not going to fall out. Good, that seems alright. I think we're ready for our LCD. But I'll put in the hinges first because those might influence how the LCD sits. And the left is in place. Now comes one of our first problems. So I've got 3 screws. So I'll put a couple on the left just to sit that in place. However, we're missing all the screws for the right-hand hinge. These screws are M2.5, and that's a problem because these wide head M2.5 screws are difficult to find. I've got lots of M2 screws in this style, but not seeing a lot of M2.5s. So I'm going to do some rummaging. At a push, we might be able to find some more on eBay. Failing that, this is one good reason to sometimes just go through a pile of broken laptops and just strip them for screws. Because times like this, where you don't have the original screws for the laptop, you'll be very grateful. This one doesn't fit very well, but it's something. No, that's not going to do anything at all. Oof, my search is complete and I was having to dig pretty deep. I found a couple of extra ones in my completely random screw assortment, which is where I go when I'm really desperate. They're slightly too big in diameter, but they will fit, so it'll be okay. There might be a little bit of overhang in places, but I think by the time we've got everything in place, it'll be fine. The last one I could not find. I need 8 in total, which is a lot. I could not find number 8, so I've got this this metal spacer with a hole in it and a screw that wasn't quite wide enough. With that combination, that should provide just enough hold down, so we've got something populating every hole. Normally, I wouldn't be super fussed about a missing screw, but when it's holding the display in place, it's kind of important because when it fails, your hinges break. So let's put these in. If you asked me for spare M2 screws in this style, I'd have about 30 of them. However, the M2.5 ones are really uncommon, which is why I've been caught out. They are available on eBay. The size you're looking for is M2.5 by 2.5. but I could only find them available from China, and they were like £1 per screw, so that's kind of horrifying. I'm sure if you went to somewhere that does like a screw specialist or fastenings place, they might have them. Thankfully, I didn't have to resort to that. So that is our hinges in and all of the screw holes populated. I've done them up as tight as I dare. You want to go as tight as you can, but at the same time, keep in mind that you are screwing into plastic. So, you know, you don't want to graunch them. Our LCD panel can go in now. So I'll just do a quick test fit. We need to figure out approximately where this is going to lay. And this one feels like it's dropping into position where it aligns up with the side and top pretty good. And that looks good to me. I think that's going to work. However, I'll just offer up the bezel. I was doing a Dell on stream recently, and I pulled off the tape, the backing tape for the stretch release, glued it down, only to find that there was a sliver of the edge of the bezel, of the edge of the LCD visible, and it completely ruined the look of the laptop, and I had to take it all out and do it again. So let's try and avoid that. Right, with that in place, that's going to be covered, and that's going to be covered. So yeah, I'm going to commit to that position. I'll plug the LCD cable back in, and then we'll remove the backing tape from the stretch release tape, and we'll press it down. And I'm just continually going around and just making sure that cables haven't jumped out of place, just so when I actually put the bezel on, that should just click in. That looks pretty good. There we go. Not going to fuss too much about the inside. That's looking better already. This LCD panel has seen a fair bit of abuse during this process, so I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, I think, and just get this bezel fitted, because that will protect the edges of the LCD. So I need to check how these cables negotiate around the edge. Generally, just making sure they've got room to move is good enough, and you'll figure the rest out when you put it into the laptop. Right, let's try and roll with that. We can always take the bezel off again if we have to. The fewer times we remove it, the better, but sometimes you just have to commit and find out. Let's bring in the base and see if we can attach it. So now I can attach this in my more traditional way, so I'll just put that right to the edge of the desk. And then I can just lay the display assembly into the laptop like that, and just supporting it with the top of my legs. And just make sure that those wires are coming out where we expect them to. That one looks good. That can come out through there, so we've got the wires right. Good. Let's put some screws in to hold that in place. There's little arrow marks on the holes that are supposed to be populated. And this hole does not have an arrow because there's a screw coming through from the underside of the laptop for that one. So we'll leave that one open. Now I'm going to gently close the laptop, and we're still going to be very careful with it because without the back cover on, there's very little to stop this top case from flexing, and you'll just snap the motherboard in half. So I'm just going to gently support the base of the screen with my thumbs as I close it up. There. And now it's closed, it's a lot easier to work on it. Right, and I think my cables are wrong because now the laptop is closed up, the wires want to go all the way around the outside of the hinge. So I think these are on the wrong side of the hinges. I suspected as much when I was putting it together, but it almost looks like it was right, so I went for it. And just gently negotiate that cable around the other side of the hinge. That's better. That's how it should be. Okay, that's all in place. Let's clean up this thermal paste and we can put the heatsink back on. I'll just get some kitchen towel and spray some alcohol onto it. And then wipe the top of the chips down. It's very tempting to spray alcohol directly onto the chips to do this, but in my experience, what will happen if you do that is you'll just spread the thermal paste all over the board and make a mess. Ask me how I know. So I found this tends to work a bit better. I'll do the same thing with the heatsink as well. And again, if I spray onto my kitchen towel, it means that I can avoid getting alcohol onto those thermal pads. Good. Now we'll put some new thermal paste on. I'm just going to use Arctic MX4, all reliable, and put a chunk on the CPU and GPU. Probably a little bit too much there, but too much is better than too little. And excess will just ooze out around the sides. And it might make a bit of a mess on top of the chip, but that's not going to do any harm. Not having enough on there, however, that means that you won't get a decent mount, and that means you don't get decent cooling. There's an order for doing these up, written on top of the heatsink here. This one, curiously enough, goes in rows. Usually it's attempting to do some kind of cross pattern, and that's what I would normally go for. However, if they've written an order on the heatsink, then there's no harm in following it. I say, missing out the 5. I'll put those antenna connectors down along with the little hold down bracket for them. There we go. Right, I think we're ready for a back cover. So I'll plug the battery back in. I'm going to just gently open it and go for a test. I could probably be a hero at this point and just close up, but we'll just open it that far and just power button that. There's a backlight. And there's a Dell logo. Excellent. Good. I can just go ahead and close that. It's going to carry on booting up, and then it'll go to sleep. I'll just go and give those a blast with the air compressor. It's not that much dust there. That'd probably come off with a paintbrush or a toothbrush, but hey, if you have air compressors, use them. There we go. Not sure if you can see that on camera, but those are a lot clearer than they were before. There we go. There's a few marks on the screen, just where the screen's got a few marks on it, but no more dirt. Excellent. Right, thank you for tuning in, everyone. That's how to rebuild the display assembly on a Dell G3 15 gaming laptop. As always, big shout out to my Patreons, my Twitch subscribers, and the YouTube channel members for helping support this kind of content. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.